So you guys know that I love Merida, Mexico, but during my research, especially as I was looking specifically at Merida, one of the places that kept popping up was Valladolid. Now, Valladolid is a small town only 2 hours away from here, and there are a lot of blogs that suggest that Valladolid is an amazing place to retire. As a slow traveler, I do tend to look at places that are recommended for retirement because generally that means sustainability. It means that it's a city that I can stay for a long period of time and get to know the local culture. And so Valladolid is definitely one of the places that popped up. I am not personally looking for a place to retire. I'm a slow traveler, which means I want to find the next location where I can hopefully stay several months, if not a full year, give or take. And while my trip was really short, I feel like I really understand the blogs that I've been reading about Valladolid so much better. So I thought I would let you know some of the differences between a place like Valladolid and a place like Merida, because there are some pretty significant differences, even though they're only 2 hours away from each other. Merida is a place that I consider very, very laid back. I'm comparing it, however, to the US lifestyle. My lifestyle in the US felt very hustle and bustle, felt like there was always things going on. I felt like I had a deadline to do this, but part of that honestly came from the fact that I was in the military, I had a job, I was starting some side hustles, and so I just had a busier lifestyle. Coming to Merida and adapting to the Mexican clock, to the Mexican way of handling time, Merida felt and still feels very relaxed, very calm, and I love this atmosphere. But at the end of the day, Merida has close to 900,000 people living here. It's actually filled with quite a lot of people, and so we do have more of a city lifestyle than other places. Valladolid, on the other hand, has 50,000 people. It is a much, much smaller town and therefore has a lot of that small town feel that you might even get a little bit in the US. So a little less going on, people noticing each other a little bit more, people getting to know the people that they notice a little bit more. So it's a very different vibe from the city life of Merida. And then physically speaking, both cities are part of the Yucatan state. We've got very similar weather. And we're both landlocked, meaning that Valladolid also does not have any beaches. However, we've got a lot of day trips that are possible. So beach-wise, playa-wise, we're much closer to Celestun or Sisal, but Valladolid is definitely closer to some of the more touristy places like Rio Lagartos, which is where the famous pink waters are, Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Bacalar. When it comes to Mayan ruins, Merida is closer to Uxmal, Mayapan. Izamal from Valladolid, you're definitely closer to Chichen Itza and Ekbalam. When it comes to cenotes, Merida proper really doesn't have one. We do technically have a cenote right next to Costco, but it's not swimmable. And we also have a cenote north to us, which right now is closed. I'm hoping that it opens up soon actually because we just got to yellow. But nonetheless, at least from where I'm living, it's probably about a half-hour drive. You can easily take an Uber there. Again, I haven't been there because it's been closed for the majority of the time that I've lived here, but those are the two closest that we have. It's certainly not walkable. Valladolid, on the other hand, has a cenote within walking distance from downtown, which is phenomenal. I absolutely love that about Valladolid. I loved waking up and going, I guess we're going to the cenote again. And we would just walk over there. Like, I loved it. I love that I could walk to the market. I love that I could walk to all the stores. So again, much smaller location. I could walk everywhere. Now there are some places where maybe you would want a ride. So they do have taxis, they do have colectivos. But overall, I think Valladolid has that small town feel, has a few cenotes really in Valladolid, as well as, of course, there are other cenotes that you can drive to similar to Merida. But I loved that about Valladolid. The cenotes are right there. The market is right there. I didn't have to drive to get everywhere. Both Valladolid and Merida have museums to go to. I believe Merida technically has more, but I'm not a huge museum person, so it's not something that would bother me necessarily. Also, I think once you've visited a museum, you're less likely to visit it twice. So if you're just coming for a short visit, the number of museums may matter to you, but in terms of living there, I don't know how much I prioritize museums. Valladolid does have a local airport, but they do not have an international airport, so that could be a limiting factor if you're looking for a place to live, simply because in an emergency, you might want to have access to an international airport. Another huge benefit of Merida for expats is that we have a strong expat community, and that expat community is accessible online. As I've been researching multiple places to go to in Mexico, I have realized how spoiled I've gotten because Merida just has so many Facebook groups as well as, of course, the WhatsApp groups. So tapping into a local expat community in Merida is relatively easy, whereas in Valladolid, while I imagine it's not going to be hard, it is harder to plan ahead prior to going, right? So you pretty much have to have boots on ground and then get to know the locals to figure out who's who in the zoo. But Mexico overall does seem to have very friendly countrymen, and therefore I think it wouldn't be a problem to figure out who those expats are. In Valladolid, I only noticed one expat Facebook group. I'm sure there are more, but perhaps they don't have the name Valladolid in the actual title, so it might be a little harder to search. Whereas in Merida, we have several Facebook groups that you can tap into. And so if having a strong expat community is important to you, Merida might be a better choice. However, if your intention really is to retire and kind of live a more quiet lifestyle, Valladolid might be that place. Now, Valladolid does have internet, but apparently they don't have fiber optic yet, and so it might be a little bit slower than, let's say, Merida. Also, Valladolid being such a small place, they don't have proper co-working spaces, although here in Merida, while we do have a handful of official co-working spaces, really when I go to co-work, I'm just going to a coffee shop that has good internet, and they definitely have that in Valladolid. We were only in Valladolid for a few days, but I will just say that I loved the food there. They have Yucatecan food similar to Merida. I don't know what it is. The food in Valladolid was amazing. So even though the selection is less, the quality of the food in Valladolid, I really enjoyed. So I don't want to say that it's necessarily better than Merida, but that's certainly my first impression having been there just a few days. Well worth the visit. Again, being a small town, things you're not gonna find in Valladolid. You're not gonna find a Walmart, you're not gonna find a Costco. You're gonna have much less imported foods in general. You're gonna have much less imported stores and products. The only foreign restaurant I noticed was a Subway. I'm sure they do have more than just the one place, but nonetheless, compared to Merida, which has a plethora of restaurants and stores from other locations, Valladolid has much less. You can find Asian food and Italian food, but you're gonna have less options than, let's say, Merida. Being a smaller location, it will also be a little bit harder to find a long-term rental. Less houses, less people coming and going means less availability of places to rent, so that is also a huge factor. But again, if everything else lines up for you in terms of Valladolid, I'm sure you can find a place. It's just a little bit harder than Merida, where rental opportunities are popping up every day and they're also disappearing every day. Like, we've got a constant turnover of places for you to rent. Valladolid, much slower turnover, so it will take a little longer probably to find your ideal home there. Valladolid does not have things like electronic stores or major hospitals. They do have clinics, of course, but a lot of people who live in Valladolid have to drive either to Merida or Cancun in order to get medical services, as well as replacing electronics that may have broken. So, especially for those of us that are digital nomads or we earn an income online, I think big picture, it would be a much harder location, but not impossible, guys. If you really are looking for a much slower pace, even slower than Merida can afford, Valladolid is probably a great option for that. Finding cost of living has been really difficult because I find that expats spend more. Expats spend more. So one of my favorite websites to look up the cost of living for an expat is expatisan.com. And while everyone is a little bit different in terms of what budget you have, or at least myself, I find that the Merida budget has been relatively close to what I'm actually spending. However, Expatisan doesn't cover towns that don't have enough expat input. And so Valladolid, while again they do have expats, they don't have the numbers that Merida has. And so I don't know for sure what the cost of living difference is for Valladolid. However, I did find one source from internationalliving.com that said for a couple, cost of living in Valladolid was $1,890 a month, compared to Merida, which it suggested would be $1,740 for a couple. So Valladolid is considered a little bit more expensive. I wonder if some of that expense, though, is related to having to go on trips to Merida or Cancun or other locations to get some of the resources you might want to get, right? Perhaps you have to have monthly medical appointments that requires your leaving the city. I'm not sure exactly why the price difference is, but again, this is one location that did give a comparison of prices. And a benefit of Valladolid could be there's definitely less English being spoken, which will require you or myself to learn more Spanish. I would consider that actually a huge plus. It's definitely top of mind as I look for the next place I want to visit in Mexico. Okay, so big picture, I would say if you are a single mother expat with a child, especially if you're English speaking, I think Merida is a no-brainer. We've just got so many resources, and when it comes to traveling with our kids, especially long term, having resources specific to your child, having an expat community for your child it's major, it's big, it's huge. Alex did not necessarily want to come to Mexico. It was not on his list of things to do. He hadn't heard any of his friends or relatives say that they wanted to go to Mexico, and so he was a little bit shocked when I suggested Mexico. And I think what really eased him into being in Mexico and being okay with Mexico is the Merida community, specifically the Merida expat community. As I look for the next place to go, that's one of the things I definitely keep in mind. Where can I connect with other expats? Somebody where Alex can feel connection, where Alex can feel like he's got friends. No, it is absolutely my intention that the both of us learn Spanish enough to where having an expat community is not a priority, but that's simply not where we're at right now. Right now, having some level of expats to talk to is still part of our lives. So again, if you're looking for a place to go, especially long term, I think Valladolid is an amazing place to visit. I'm really glad that I went there and that I had my very kind of laid back vacation, but it's not a place where I think I would move to for a long period of time simply because of the lack of amenities. So I do think for a first city, a first Mexico, like dipping your toe into living here, Merida is a much more logical location to start with. And once you're comfortable here, I think you'll more easily be able to transfer to another location. And of course, that is a hint. That's my way of letting you know that I'm looking at other places to go. I'm pondering where our next move should be. We've been here for a year and a half. Part of the reason why we've lasted that long is definitely because of the pandemic, but now I think we're getting to a place where we're ready to explore another part of Mexico. Let me know in the comments below the locations you think I should be looking at. I'll give you a hint, it's not gonna be in the Yucatan, specifically because one, I would like a place that's not quite so hot, and two, Mexico is huge, and I think we do this a lot. Other countries do it to the US. We generalize countries as being like one type of place. Unless the country is super, super small, and even then, guys. So Mexico, being a pretty good size, has also different states, and each state has a different vibe, and I really want to tap into seeing some of those other vibes. So let me know in the comments below if you think you know where we're going next. No cheating, because some of you subscribers are local friends and family that actually know, or you're part of my Patreon team, so you already know where we're going. But I'm curious if those who do not actually know can guess where my next location will be.
It doesn't even make sense why I think about you. It was only one night, only that time, and it's not my style to be caught up in the middle like this. 'Cause now I dream about you. I was probably too drunk, it's blurry, but I've got the image of you running circles in my mind right now.